Parshas Boy, I'd like to begin firstly by thanking everyone who gives me feedback. It's much appreciated. All the comments that come through, especially via text, because then I can put it on my status and then more people watch it, so it's all very good. So thank you very much for that. This week's share is sponsored Le'ilu Nishmas Gitel Bas Rabbi Yosef Chaim Oleho Hasholim. The yard site is Gimel Shvat. Neshama should have an aliyah. If you wish to sponsor any future episodes, please be in touch. In this week's Sedra, Parshas Boy, the Yidden are nearing the moment of Yitzias Mitzrayim. I want to focus this week on the mitzvah that's given in this week's Sedra of Korban Pesach. I'm going to ask two questions. In Perigid Beis Pasuk Chof Aleph, in this week's Sedra, the Pasuk says, "Vayoma aleim mishchu ukechu lachem tzoin lemishbecheisechem v'shachatu haposach." You should draw near, take for yourself a sheep, for your families, and you should shech the Korban Pesach. The Midrashim say, Medrash Haggadah that are quoted here, but a lot of Midrashim say a similar thing. Mishchu ukechu lachem means mishchu yedechem me Avoda Zara v'achakach v'shachatu haPesach. First, draw away from Avoda Zara, and then shech your Korban Pesach. So hidden in this instruction of shechting a Korban Pesach will stop doing Avoda Zara and instead turn to Korban Pesach. So our first question is, how could it possibly be that after all the makkos, after all the incredible display of HaKadosh Baruch Hu's might and prowess that the Yidden had witnessed up until this point, we're holding before Makkos B'choros, they saw the makkos affecting the Mitzrayim and not Goshen. They saw Choshech, where it was dark for them and light for them. It's just unbelievable the amount of miracles that they saw within the makkos. How on earth could there have been Avodah Zara still going on? And hadn't they already shown their emunah in HaKadosh Baruch Hu when they said in earlier Sedras, Vayam men ha'am, the people believed in HaKadosh Baruch Hu? What's happened now? That's the first question. And the second question is on the very next pasuk, because we're also instructed to do something with the dam, with the blood of the Korban Pesach. And the pasuk says, "Olakachtem agudas ezov utvaltem badom." You should take a type of grass, you should dip it into the blood of the Korban Pesach. V'higatem el hamashkoif el shtei hamezuzos min adom, and you should then go to your doorpost and your lintel, and you should smear the blood of the Korban Pesach on there. V'atem le'seitu ishma Pesach beisa, don't leave your house overnight. So Rashi brings the following words: Me'achar sheniten reshus lemashchis lechabel einoi mavchin ben tzadik l'rosha. Because the mashchis, the destroyer, the malach, I suppose, the destroyer of the mashchis, was given reshus, was given permission to destroy, doesn't make a difference between a tzaddik and a rosha, so basically keep out his way. But the dam was intended to be a source of protection for Klal Yisrael. They sort of ward off the mashchis. Don't come in here. We're good. So we're going to ask the question the way Rav Shimon Schwab asks it, but others also ask it, which is that in Haggadah Shal Pesach, also on a pasuk in this week's Sedra, we darshan va'avarti be'eretz Mitzrayim b'alaylo hazeh. HaKadosh Baruch Hu said, I passed over Eretz Mitzrayim on this night, and we say in Haggadah Shal Pesach, ani v'loi malach, ani v'loi sorof, ani v'loi hashliach. HaKadosh Baruch Hu says, I, Hashem, myself, conducted this makkah of Makkos B'choros, not a malach, not a sorof, not a shliach. So if HaKadosh Baruch Hu himself is the one who is enacting this makkah of Korban Pesach, of Makkos B'choros, then what opportunity was there exactly for this so-called mashchis to wreak havoc and kill off whoever he wants and loy mavchin ben tzadik l'rosha? It's HaKadosh Baruch Hu who's doing it. Why was there a need for the dam to protect the Klal Yisrael? So we'll get to that second. These are the two questions that we'll delve into Be'ez Hashem. We're going to begin with a fascinating and lengthy Meshech Chochmah, because it's absolutely fascinating what he says on these psukim, and we're going to answer Hashem with that, the first question we asked. But before I do so, I just want to say the disclaimer is that the Meshech Chochmah is so vast and is so lengthy in its detail that we are really doing a disservice by saying the little that we are going to say tonight. So anyone who wants to get into the Meshech Chochmah is more than welcome to, by picking up a Meshech Chochmah and going through it. It's a fascinating shtickle. Obviously we'll try and stick to the core that we can draw from the Meshech Chochmah as it pertains to us. So the Meshech Chochmah begins his piece by mentioning, first of all, that there's a machloikus in Medrash and Mishli. Where does Chochmah Where does wisdom exist in a person? Heichon Matsuya, Belev Ibarosh. Is the wisdom of a person, the Chochmah of a person, situated in the heart of a person or in the head of a person? And he goes on to say, the two areas, head and heart, are only an example, or a metaphor, right? The two areas we're talking about, he says, are the hergeshois and the muskolos. Hergeshois are the feelings, and muskolos, we're going to call it, is the intelligence of a person. He says, within the feelings of a person, in that category, that's where all the midas are. All the feelings that we have, all the reactive feeling that we have, whether it's gaiva, kas, moira, right, the fear, anxiety, everything that we have, all the midas, all the characteristics of a person, that's all within that bracket of hergeshois, the feelings of a person, which we say, as I say metaphorically, it's in the heart. But the muskolos, that's where there's wisdom, so-called in the head. That's where it's possible for a person to see beyond, to gain perspective, to be able to identify right from wrong, to weigh it up. That's the difference he begins with. And he goes on to say that hergeshois, feelings, we have from birth. But muskolos, intelligence, only comes later. The way he says it is, intelligence comes only keshenishtalem ha'odom, which literally means when a person has perfected himself. But from the context, it's clear that he goes on to say that he further makes the divide between these two things as Yetzer Tov and Yetzer Hara. And he says that the Yetzer Hara is fueling the hergeshim of a person, the feelings, and the natural feelings, obviously not progressed, not feelings that have been worked on, but natural feelings, natural reactions of a person come purely from the Yetzer Hara. And the muskolos is the Yetzer Tov, where the Yetzer Tov offers a person the ability to have a perspective, to be able to discern right from wrong. Now we know the Yetzer Hara is there from a birth of a person. The Yetzer Tov comes by bar and bas mitzvah. So it kind of all matches in my mind together, that we can sort of understand the Meshech Chochmah is pointing that hergeshois, this natural feelings of a person, will be there from birth. But the muskolos is something perhaps at least begins to come. Intelligence begins when a person is bar and bas mitzvah. Okay. Let's accept all of this face value. Obviously, you can imagine we're not getting into the psychology of it. We're not getting into there's plenty and much to talk of in terms of working out exactly how it works, how a person operates, and where the Yetzer Tov is and where the Yetzer Hara is. I'm not getting into it all. I'm just saying this is how the Meshech Chochmah begins his piece, and you'll see why it's relevant. But then next, the Meshech Chochmah goes on and talks about the genesis of Emunah in Klal Yisrael. Where did it all begin? And we know who was the first Ma'amin. The first Ma'amin was Avraham Avinu. Says Meshech Chochmah, what was Avraham Avinu's shtick? What did he do? He said in his time, the world was so enamored by natural teva and by feelings, hergeshim of a person. This is what Meshech Chochmah says. When they saw beauty in that time of Avraham Avinu, when they saw beauty or love or strength, all sorts of physical attributes, things that a person's heart might flutter when they get touched by such beauty and by such love and such, or fear, or whatever it is, whatever the emotion is that's hitting a person. The way they reacted in those times was they saw that as a deity. And they went, oh, if this is how we're reacting, this is how we're feeling, it must be there's a God there. So much so, says the Meshech Chochmah, that they would give these attributes, they would give these feelings names of God. They would say, Elil HaYofi, Elil HaGvura, Elil HaAva. Kayodua, he says, as is well known. In the time of Avraham Avinu, the entire world operated from their heart. Simply what they felt, they saw as truth, as ultimate deity. So where in their mind did God lie? Where was this God of the world? It was something that they could just interact with as a feeling, as one would with when one interacts with something in this world. Comes along Avraham Avinu. Says the Meshech Chochmah, Omad Avraham Avinu v'hispoinein. Very important word. She'einoi chelik mehanevron. We said last year a whole share on this, that Avraham Avinu spent 37 years working out the truth. He went on a journey for 37 years figuring out who was in charge of the world. But the wisdom that Avraham Avinu came to was he realized It's so small-minded and such a mistake to think that HaKadosh Baruch Hu, the omnipresent, the almighty, the one in charge of absolutely everything in this universe and who created it, is going to be something or someone that we can interact with as though one would interact with just a feeling that one feels when they see Gvura, Yofi, Ava or something like that. It can't be that HaKadosh Baruch Hu is limited to the human experience that we experience just by a little interaction that we have. That was Avraham Avinu's insight, where he realized HaKadosh Baruch Hu is me'al. Hashem must be above it all. Limitless, formless, something spiritual, something above what we might just interact with in nature. So much so, says the Meshech Chochmah, that Rabbeinu Bachai says, the level of clarity that Avraham Avinu got to was the level that really belongs to either a great philosopher or a Novi. Interesting that those are the two options Rabbeinu Bachai says. But there's a certain level of clarity that Avraham Avinu got where he realized the nature, the place that HaKadosh Baruch Hu really should reside in our mind, in our world, in our experience of life, is something completely above, not limited to the human experience. Above it. So in other words, what the Meshech Chochmah is trying to point out here is Avraham Avinu shifted from where the world was at the time, which is everything was all a case of what people felt and what people experienced in the world of nature. And Avraham Avinu shifted that to perspective, to real Chochmah, to real wisdom, the muskolos. Avraham Avinu moved the dial from trying to figure out the God of the world based on just heart and feelings, and moved it to perspective, to real, pure wisdom. The one's able to see bigger picture. And thus, now that Avraham Avinu reached the point of being our first Ma'amin, he began a generational emunah, father to son, where we know deep in our bones, and he taught to his child, etc., that HaKadosh Baruch Hu is not part of the physical world, and HaKadosh Baruch Hu is obviously the king of the world. And he brings the Gemara in Shabbos, and therefore we say about Klal Yisrael, Shehin Ma'aminim, B'nei Ma'aminim. They are the children. You know why they're the children? Because this is what the chain was of Emunah. This is the generational Emunah that began with Avraham Avinu. Because of this phenomenal insight that Avraham Avinu had from a place of pure intelligence. I just want to make clear, I don't mean, and the Meshech Chochmah certainly does not mean to suggest, that within Yiddishkeit, we're all a bunch of cold fish, and everything is very technical and all just in the head, and we don't engage at all with our heart. Absolutely is not the case. And open up any part of Chovos Halvavos and you'll see Chovos Halvavos, right? It's all about the heart. And of course, HaKadosh Baruch Hu wants V'li kirvas elikim li toiv and all the rest of it. It's absolutely, any sefer you want that talks about this, obviously the heart is important. But what the Meshech Chochmah is trying to say is, from my understanding, and he goes on, as I say, we don't have time to get into it all, but from my understanding, he's trying to say, true wisdom lies in a person's ability to take a step back, not to be driven by or be reactive to every feeling that comes into his body, every experience that he has in nature, and tries to fit HaKadosh Baruch Hu into his small world of how we see it. We have to take a step back and see big picture and have perspective. And perspective is the key word here. And that's what comes from true intelligence. As I say, metaphorically, we say that belongs in the head. Okay, so this is Avraham Avinu, and that's how Emunah began. Says the Meshech Chochmah, what happened to Mitzrayim? Clearly in Mitzrayim, Klal Yisrael lost their footing with Emunah. So what happened? Says the Meshech Chochmah, O bekoshi hashibut shel Mitzrayim, kemat hayon nishkach, v'hayu oivdim Avoda Zara. Because of the hardship of the shibut, this clarity, this perspective that Avraham Avinu brought into the world of HaKadosh Baruch Hu being me'al, in charge, was forgotten. Kemat was forgotten. And Klal Yisrael turned to Avoda Zara. Now we don't understand the Yetzer Hara Avoda Zara today because Chazal got rid of it for us. So it's something we're going to have a difficulty trying to engage with on some level. But clearly, the Yetzer Hara Avoda Zara was a physical draw. It was something that people felt in a way that a person might associate other taivas, as being a physical draw. It's something that your body is enamored by, drawn to, wanting of. Avoda Zara was a similar type of Yetzer Hara. People took to it with a natural desire. So Yidden, says the Meshech Chochmah, were so burdened by the Shibud Mitzrayim. They had nothing. Before Moshe Rabbeinu turned up with a message of hope, what did they really have to cling on to? And so unfortunately, they forgot. They became clouded. It became years, decades of Shibud Mitzrayim, day after day, night after night. So much sorrow, so much terrible happening that was going on in Golus. Sadly, they lost perspective. They lost their emunah. And they turned to Avoda Zara instead, perhaps as some form of relief. Rabbi say, all of that is the background to what we began with the Korban Pesach. Because when it came time for the Korban Pesach, and we started by quoting the Pasuk of Chazal, Hakadosh Baruch Hu said, go choose a tzoyin, go choose a sheep, mishchu yedeim me'avoda zara, draw yourselves away from avoda zara, says the Meshech Chochmah. Lefi shenikne bohem ha'emunah ha'amitis me'aviseim Avram Yisrael Yaakov, because Klal Yisrael had a kinyan, they had inside them emunah that came about from the original ma'aminim of Avram Yisrael Yaakov. Berega echod chozru le'emunosoi ha'amitis, in one moment they were able to switch and turn and return to the original emunah that they had deep down inside them. Not only did they just believe in HaKadosh Baruch Hu at that point, says the Meshech Chochmah, they offered up Elihei Mitzrayim, le'eineihem, in front of the Mitzrayim's eyes. They tied it to their beds. V'hoya mesiras nefesh. The Yidden, in that moment when being instructed by HaKadosh Baruch Hu of Korban Pesach, was suddenly reminded of what they really had deep inside. And yes, they had been serving Avoda Zara, sadly. Mikosh HaShivah, they'd lost their way. But with one mitzvah, with one pasuk, with one commandment of HaKadosh Baruch Hu, boom, berega echad, they were reminded of the emunah amitis that they had inside them, and they switched right back on, they were right there. Rabbi Yisai, besides the wonderful observation that we can make, and we will draw this to ourselves as well, that Klal Yisrael, how easy it was, berega echad, for them to switch back and be reminded and snap back into the emunah mindset, emunah reality. But realize the tremendous compassion and love that's apparent here from HaKadosh Baruch Hu. You know, Kavayachol, if we were to take it to our terms, and we don't have a king today in the same way that we had, but you imagine a king and a subject, and the subject is disloyal to the king, and the subject goes looking for other powers, ignoring the very king that he's supposed to be loyal to. Can you imagine that it's within the human capacity for that king to still show compassion to that son, to bring him in, to remind him, to encourage him? This is exactly what HaKadosh Baruch Hu was doing to the Yidden in Mitzrayim after decades of the Yidden serving Avoda Zara, Rabbi Yisai, turning away from HaKadosh Baruch Hu. Yes, Nebuch, they were under tremendous hardship. We can't judge them. But the fact is, they were not loyal to HaKadosh Baruch Hu very much in that regard. And yet HaKadosh Baruch Hu tells them, no, Mishchu Yideim, put it away. Remember who you are. And the Yidden berega echad, they snap back. It's a tremendous limud. It makes no difference where a Yid is. We have the emunah, generational emunah, implanted within us from the time of Avraham Avinu. And even if, as we said, Avraham Avinu had a unique clarity, had a unique philosophy, he had a unique perspective and insight where he came from, where he was able to see with a clarity that perhaps we can't see today as much, that the Rebbeinu Shalom is the Meyal. Okay, Avraham Avinu was unique in that way, but we are Ma'aminim, B'nei Ma'aminim. We have it inside us, at our core, and all it takes is one reminder, one sense of encouragement, one moment of insight, Berega Echad, and we can switch, and we can get back into it. We asked, the first question we asked was, how come Klal Yisrael could have been serving Avoda Zara at that time? It's a good question, but there's an even bigger question. How come the fact that Klal Yisrael was serving Avoda Zara at that time, they were able to switch so quickly? Because if you think about it, Avoda Zara means you don't believe in Hashem. And now with one pasuk, with one instruction from Tzivoy of do Korban Pesach, suddenly boom, they leave it all behind and turn back to Hashem. What's going on here? What the Meshech Chochmah has laid out for us is that even if in Mitzrayim Klal Yisrael lost their conscious awareness and conscious connection to Emunah and HaKadosh Baruch Hu, and unfortunately because of the Shibud and Koshi Mitzrayim, they turned to Avoda Zara as some sort of relief, let's say. But it never removed their internal innate connection to HaKadosh Baruch Hu and their emunah that was implanted in them from Avraham Avinu. And all they needed was one encouragement, one mitzvah, one tzivui. And boom, they were back. Tremendous. Now let's try and move to answer the second question we asked. If HaKadosh Baruch Hu himself, as we say in Haggadah Shel Pesach, was running the show and dealt the makkah of makas b'choros, why was it necessary for the Yidden to put blood on their doorposts to ward away the mashchis? Surely Hashem himself was doing makas b'choros, they wouldn't need the blood. Why was it necessary? So first, just to mention, as an alternative, the Beis HaLevi says, interestingly, that by makas b'choros there were two things going on. There was the actual death strike, so to speak. There was the makkah of b'choros, where every b'chor in every household was struck. But he says, besides that, Nasa shom magefo gdoila mehasirchoin o meipush ha'avir. As a result of all the death, there was a terrible plague that came into being, that came from the germs, from the stench, from the atmosphere, which itself was deadly. And he says that's shot in the pasuk. Ein bayis asher ein shom mes. There was no house that got out of it, because aside from the fact that the firstborns were struck, but everyone was to be affected by this plague that was just ravaging around. He says this plague, that was the mashchis, that wasn't HaKadosh Baruch Hu. So true, HaKadosh Baruch Hu was in charge of makas b'choros and he dealt with that, and he wouldn't have affected Klal Yisrael chas v'shalom. But as we said, the mashchis is got its own permissions. So the mashchis in terms of the plague may have come in. So the blood on the doorposts provided Klal Yisrael with that protection. Interesting, that's the Beis HaLevi. But the one I really wanted to come to was Rav Shimon Shvab. Rav Shimon Shvab said that makas b'choros was by Hashem. But Hashem also said, in that context, "Ubechol Elohei Mitzrayim eses shvatim." I'm going to make signs. I'm going to be judging all the gods, the Avoda Zara. Says Rav Shimon Shvab, that part, that was done by the Malach. That wasn't done by HaKadosh Baruch Hu. HaKadosh Baruch Hu dealt the b'choros, the makkah. But in terms of getting rid of Avoda Zara, that was left to the Malach. And he says, this is very interesting, just in brackets, if you remember this for Haggadah Shel Pesach on Seder night, it's quite a good var. But on Seder night we say that every makkah that HaKadosh Baruch Hu brought on the Mitzrayim were really much more. So, with every makkah we say there was 5 makkahs, because it says, Yishalach bom charoin apoi achas, and we say, Mishlachas malachei roim chomesh. It says the Rav Shimon Shvab, what it's saying with this is, that aside from the actual makkah, there was more damage going on as a result. And the extra damage, the extra makkahs, the 5 extra makkahs, were done by mishlachas malachei roim, which is another word for malachei chabola, mashchis, okay? Malachim who are there to destroy. Says Rav Shimon Shvab, besides HaKadosh Baruch Hu, malachim had what to do with, had what to play with in Mitzrayim, and specifically regarding this makkah, makas b'choros, yes, Hashem struck the b'choros, but the malachim were instructed to concentrate on getting rid of those of the Avoda Zara. But Rabbi Sai, we've already said, unfortunately, the Yidden were of the Avoda Zara, which put them at risk, which put them in a matzav of danger, that the mashchis had reshus to get rid of Avoda Zara, they would also come into the Yidden's houses to get rid of Avoda Zara and the people who are of Avoda Zara as well. You know what HaKadosh Baruch Hu said? The very Korban Pesach, the dam from Korban Pesach, take that dam and put it on your doorposts, and that will ward away the mashchis. So HaKadosh Baruch Hu isn't just encouraging his people, ignoring the fact that they had turned to strange gods, to Avoda Zara. Forget that, we've already mentioned that. Now he's saying, I want to help you avoid repercussion. I want to help you avoid the natural consequence of the mashchis coming to destroy you. Take that very Korban Pesach. The Korban Pesach, which was a sign of Klal Yisrael's ability to switch back on, to do their best, to come back, be'emunah, and put it on your doorpost, because that will be your protection. And I want to end with a very powerful Reb Elia, which is connected to this point. Reb Elia brings from the Rambam in Moreh Nevuchim, who says that a secret was revealed to him. Rambam in Moreh Nevuchim says a secret was revealed to him. If someone has bitochen godol in Hashem, he has absolute faith in HaKadosh Baruch Hu. So in that moment, He's completely connected and present in Hashem with Hashem. They are in the zone, so to speak. Says the Rambam, Lo yuchal shum nezek likorid elov. No amount of damage will be able to come to that person. And Rav Elia brings from the Medrash Neicha Rabbah, Afilu Rosha v'hu beiteach b'Hashem. HaKadosh Baruch Hu mekabel lo. Even if a person's a wicked person, but if he's beiteach b'HaKadosh Baruch Hu, Hashem will come to his aid. You can see from here such a powerful mechazik. Anyone, at any stage, wherever they are at, whatever they have done, whether they are a Rasha or a Tzaddik, they are able to turn to HaKadosh Baruch Hu be'emunah in that moment, and HaKadosh Baruch Hu will be there for them and protect them. Why? Because HaKadosh Baruch Hu knows who we really are. He knows our essence. He knows we are ma'aminim b'nei ma'aminim. And yes, we may have moved from where Avraham Avinu, from the place where Avraham Avinu was. Yes, we don't have the clarity that Avraham Avinu had. Yes, mikoishi hashibud, even in the shibud today, Rabbi Yisai, akati avdei achashverosh anan, the Gemara tells us we're still in a matzav of servitude on some level. HaKadosh Baruch Hu knows what we're going through. HaKadosh Baruch Hu knows the challenges of Golos. HaKadosh Baruch Hu knows the challenges of the modern day world that we live in. So yes, Yidden unfortunately can get distracted. But don't forget, HaKadosh Baruch Hu doesn't forget that ultimately deep down we carry the innate emunah inside us. And HaKadosh Baruch Hu tells us that if we are beiteach b'Hashem, if we take the opportunity to have emunah in HaKadosh Baruch Hu, He'll be there for us. So in summary, we asked, first of all, how could it be that Klal Yisrael could serve Avoda Zara? So we said from the Meshech Chochmah, look, sadly, Mikoshi Ashibud, there was suffering, there were troubles. Klal Yisrael unfortunately got distracted. They lost their way. They lost their sense of clarity from their ancestor Avraham Avinu. But berega echod, so important, berega echod chazru le'emunosei amitis. In 1 second they came back. And we said that this instruction from HaKadosh Baruch Hu of Mishchu Yideyim, of taking the Korban Pesach, was actually an instruction of love. It was of compassion. It was HaKadosh Baruch Hu recognizing that Klal Yisrael aren't holding where they ought to be holding. And yet, even so, HaKadosh Baruch Hu is asking of them, reminding them, encouraging them, move away from Avoda Zara. Come on. Remember who you really are. Come back. And therefore we said, when we asked the question, why was the protection necessary for Klal Yisrael during Makas B'Choros when Hashem was running the show? We said, yes, Hashem was running the show in Makas B'Choros, but there was still a mashchis, of Shimon Shvab says, there was still a mashchis who was coming to deal with the consequence of Avoda Zara. We said from Shimon Shvab, HaKadosh Baruch Hu says, take the dam of Korban Pesach and put that on your doorpost. Let that be the source of protection. The very dam, the very Korban Pesach, which was the moment of Berega Echod, that moment of where Klal Yisrael remembered who they were as a people. And they left in that moment Avoda Zara behind. We can add the Rebbe Elia, they had Bitochen Gadol in that moment, in HaKadosh Baruch Hu. As the Meshech Chochmah says, they were Moisa Nefesh, to offer up the very sheep that the Mitzrayim served as their Avoda Zara. In that moment, HaKadosh Baruch Hu says, take the dam of that experience, put it on your doorpost, and that will protect you. So Rabbi said 2 takeaways for me, from this week's Seder, from the Korban Pesach specifically, is first of all, we are ma'aminim b'nei ma'aminim. Never ever forget the fact that tifarayin, deep down, we carry within us innate emunah. It doesn't matter where a person's at. It doesn't matter where a person's got to. It doesn't matter tzaddik or rasha or anything in between. We are ma'aminim b'nei ma'aminim. We have it inside us and it's always available to us. And if in one moment we take the chance and the opportunity to be boiteach b'HaKadosh Baruch Hu, HaKadosh Baruch Hu will protect us. It's a tremendous zechus and a tremendous value that we have as Yidden. That we are ma'aminim berega echad, we can switch back into the emunah mode. And secondly, and I think incredibly, we do not appreciate enough how much HaKadosh Baruch Hu loves us and has compassion for us. That HaKadosh Baruch Hu went to such a degree in Mitzrayim to our people who were so downtrodden, who were so far away, who had fallen so low, who had gotten so confused, who had turned to Avoda Zara. I don't think you realize what we're talking about. He turned away from HaKadosh Baruch Hu to serve something else, as if to acknowledge a deity outside of HaKadosh Baruch Hu. It's just astonishing. But HaKadosh Baruch Hu looks past all of that. HaKadosh Baruch Hu still sees us as his people, still sees us as the descendants of Avraham Avinu and all of us. And HaKadosh Baruch Hu offers us opportunities through the Korban Pesach, through the dam of the Korban Pesach, to return, to stand strong. The Emunah and HaKadosh Baruch Hu. If that is the only lesson we get from this Parsha, That alone will be a tremendous, powerful lesson. Shkoyach, don't ever forget that.